Welcome to Money Mondays. If you don't know who I am, my name is JB Bolvedin. I'm the founder and CEO of Tilbury Success Solutions, the largest real estate consulting company on the East Coast. And I have a special guest for you. Went from attorney to one of the top real estate investors on Long Island, Jeremiah Dalton. Jeremiah, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, brother. I appreciate it.
So it's kind of interesting because, you start going to, I want you to tell your story, but it's kind of interesting because you evolved from attorney to now real estate investor. Like, how did that evolve? How did that even happen?
Well, the reality is that what I'm doing now, I always wanted to do, but I had a lot of external pressure from family members to go and get an education and kind of go down that road. So I chose law school kind of thinking, well, even if I don't become a lawyer, it'll help me and it'll assist me in whatever entrepreneurial venture I have, specifically real estate. But I think at the end of the day, I always knew that this is where I was going to end up. And as much I was trying to convince myself that, hey, let me go down this road of becoming an attorney. I want to make everybody happy. It's a scenario of trying to make a win-win for everybody. And if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't have done that because I lost a lot of time, time that I honestly wish I had back. While it is helpful, I wouldn't really recommend that as like a pathway if you want to get into real estate.
So with law school, it was your parents that was really pushing you towards the education path?
Yeah.
So that wasn't where your head was at initially?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. But, I didn't want to let them down. I'd always been a pretty good student.
Yeah.
And so like most people, you and I are around the same age, it's drilled into your head, hey, go to good schools, get a good education, get a good job, and kind of live out that life that everyone projects that you should, be living. In reality, we've started to kind of break away from that, and even a lot of parents are advising their kids differently, or there's been this movement, at least, to advise their parents differently. But that wasn't the case. 20, 25 years ago, I'm 36 now, but at the time that I was considering colleges, being an entrepreneur just kind of meant that you didn't have a job, you were just a loser. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now the entrepreneurial term, the entrepreneur category has been glorified in a good way, you know what I mean? But now it's looked at very differently.
So growing up, how many brothers and sisters did you have?
I have one younger sister.
Okay. And your parents, what did they do?
So my father did construction within the film business. There was more specific term, but for audiences, was behind the scenes construction in the film business. My mother was an X-ray technician. They both grew up in Brooklyn, so I came from an Irish-Italian family. And for them, neither of them had gone to college. And I think they saw from an early age that I had a good memory, and school kind of came easy to me. And so they were like, well, you need to be like, my friend so-and-so, or, this person, and you need to go become a doctor, and you need to become a lawyer. And my mother being in the medical field, I think she, wanted that role for me. But the reality is I knew that, and you see it now, a lot of doctors, unfortunately, they're not in very happy places. Medical industry, especially with insurance companies, hard way to make money.
Yeah.
And so I knew that path wasn't for me. So I said, well, let me go to law school, and no matter what, I could take that. It'll kind of transcend so many different arenas and so many different practice areas. It'll help me wherever I go. Has it helped? Like I said, yes, but it's not something that if I had to do it over again, I would do.
Yeah. As then we went into law school originally, were you thinking real estate law, criminal law?
I was thinking, I took a lot of real estate law classes. But at the end of the day, it was one of those things where as more and more and more, I bought my first investment property when I was in my first year of law school with my now wife. We met in law school.
So there's a win from law school.
There's a win, I met my wife, bought my first investment property while I was in my first year. So I knew then that that was the path that I was going down. Unfortunately, though, you graduate, the bills come, the student loans come. She wants to get married. We want to get a house, and so I pursued, that degree to the extent that I could in an effort to make money and get us established. But I would be lying to you if I told you that each day I felt like a little part of me was dying because I wasn't doing what I really wanted to do.
Wow. So you graduated, you're starting your life, and you're an attorney at that time.
Yes.
So you're practicing real estate law at that time?
No, actually. So funny enough, the market had tanked. In 2010 when we graduated, the real estate market, the legal market just had tanked. So I kind of actually bounced around a little bit outside of the legal industry just to make money. I was literally just chasing what I could do to make money, to get us, established, where to buy a house. Once we bought the house and we started having children, I wound up settling into a role as an attorney for the labor union that my father was a part of and that I was also a part of too. So I settled into what I thought was going to be some kind of legal position within that particular union. Turned out it was not at all what I expected. I was paid very well, but it was not at all what I expected. I thought maybe I would move up within the ranks, and I came to find out very quickly that there was a lot of internal politics and BS that I probably just was never going to make any sort of headway there. So it was kind of at that point where I was like, all right, well, we're established, I'm making money, we have a home, we have a beautiful family, but what kind of message is this sending to my children? At the time, I had one child, now I have three. And what kind of message am I sending to my kids, right? If I'm not pursuing what it is I've always wanted, and I'm gonna be stuck at this job, and I may not even be stuck, they may get rid of me because it was a controversial move to even bring me there in the first place. What does that tell my kids if I'm not pursuing exactly what I love? How can I tell them to follow what they want to do if I'm not in fact doing it? And it's not I knew wasn't for a lack of ability.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to be a hypocrite to them, and I knew that the way to set the best example for them was actually to go out and pursue what I needed to pursue.
That's awesome. And then what was that? So now we're there, you've decided, okay, something's got to give. What's that next step? What actually made that trajectory go into real estate investor?
Well, it kind of got to the point where, like, both my wife and I were working. She worked as a traditional attorney. I worked as, like I said, an attorney within this labor union. We were both working long hours. We weren't around for our kids. Our daughter was being left in the hands of our nanny, and what finally just kind of triggered it for me was that my daughter was not only with a nanny, but she was also with daycare. She kept getting sick because when you're in those kind of environments, the kids just get sick over and over again. Not being able to take her to the doctor, we had to get somebody else to take her to the doctor. We knew that we weren't going to be the kind of parents that we wanted to be. That was kind of like when a moment, like I snapped, and I was like, I can't do this. This can't be my life. I'm not going down this road. I'm not going to set this example for my kids. I'm going to be around for my kids. If they need a problem to be solved, if their health is in jeopardy, or if they need me, I got to take them to the doctors. I have to have life on my own terms, not somebody else's. So ultimately, I realized I was going to have to figure out a way to. I always wanted to flip houses. I had no idea how I was going to do it. So I had to start taking the necessary steps to at least learn the mechanics of flipping houses. So I reached out to somebody who was out in Colorado. He had a blog that I followed for about a year. And his name is Mark Ferguson, investformore.com, F-O-U-R. We still talk to this day. And I reached out to him, and I decided he was at that time putting together a little small mastermind group, coincidentally. So it was a couple $1,000s to join. I joined, and I basically peppered him with questions every day for 6 months. And what do you do here? What do you do here? I read books. But it was when I finally made the firm commitment that my life was going to change. And I think everybody can have that moment, but it's fleeting. So my advice to anybody who might be watching this is when you hit that breaking point, when you've had enough, you got to take action then. You got to start then, because a month or two, the effects of that moment will wear off. Yeah. And then you'll find yourself back to where you started. So I had that moment, that breaking point, and immediately, there wasn't fear about sending this person a few $1,000s. And once I made that financial commitment to where I knew that, okay, I have somebody that I can go to, I started picking his brain. I started to gain momentum. And I didn't have to do any deals, but I started to gain momentum. I started to feel confident that, hey, this isn't as hard as it looks. I understand what I need to do. Then once I felt, like I said, the mechanics, the base, the foundation to actually go ahead and flip houses, then I had to start looking for houses. And so, you know, the real next step was when I did that first flip. And I would say from there on, it fortunately has been, you know, an upward trajectory.
That's awesome. So that first flip, were you afraid at all when you?
Terrified. Not terrified. Couldn't sleep. I had a contractor quit, not quit on me. I had to fire him. He wasn't a bad guy, but he started off pretty good, and it just got progressively like worse and worse and worse and worse. And what should have been like a 6-week rehab now turned into, we were at month 3.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And I could see it wasn't necessarily the pace that was scaring me. It was that I was going to the house, and I joke, I spent more time at that house and more time on that flip than I do with the 25, 30 projects that we have going on at once now. I spent more time with that first one. But unfortunately, like, I would go to the house and you would see like doors wouldn't close, and you could see like, you know, trim would be misaligned.
Oh my God.
So, and every day, like, we were making little to no progress, and if we were doing anything, it was terrible. I don't know really what happened with him, but I had to fire him. And it was a pretty decent sized rehab too, and had a pool. So it was a lot to take on for like your first house. But I wound up bringing somebody in. He was pretty good. He kind of straightened everything out. We got it on the market, and I sold it that first weekend.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
And when was this? What year about?
This was 2015.
Okay, not so long ago.
No, not that long ago. Not that long ago.
Now, your first deal, did you go in all cash? Did you borrow hard money? Did you bring in partners? What's the structure of that first deal you did?
So, a combination of things. So, I wasn't really sure how. I realized that, well, let me back up a little bit. You know, buying my first house, right, and kind of taking that path where we bought that house, we bought the house at the bottom of the market. So, from 2012 to 2015, the market was rising, right? So we had a good amount of equity in it. I was able to use some of that equity in the house towards that flip, but I didn't have enough. So what I did was I knew I could either go the hard money route, or there was another option, and that was I actually approached my dad. And I said, you know, I know you don't have, there's not a lot of liquid cash around, but I've got the income, I've got the credit, you have the equity. Why don't we open up a joint equity line of credit against your house, and, you know, we'll use basically my income and, you know, my financial backing and then background, and you use the equity, put them together, and we can essentially, you know, flip houses, and I'll give you whatever money I use, I'll give you a fixed percentage of that as interest. And I still do that to this day. Wow. Now, it wasn't a lot of money, okay, but it was enough to be able to do that first deal. Okay, and to this day, I mean, he's retired now. That's supplemental. It's been supplemental retirement income for him. Now, have we raised millions and millions of dollars? Yes, we have. You know what I mean? That represents just a mere fraction of the amount of money that we've raised. But yes, that was basically what I did for that first deal. So I took my home equity line of credit and his home equity that we were essentially on together, put them together, and that was how I was able to do that first deal.
Wow. So, I mean, the first deal must have felt some real pressure because you got your house line tied up, your dad's house tied up.
Oh, yeah.
You're all in, probably as liquid as you can be at that point.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about like the money, how much money was used for that first deal?
So I had basically, full disclosure, 100 from my house, 200 from his. So I was like, all right, with 300, I could probably buy something in like the mid 100s, you know, put, you know, whatever it is into it and try to sell it for hopefully close to 300. So that's what happened. So I knew at least I had capital ready to deploy. I mean, I didn't even know at the time, like I saw people making offers on, you know, bank-owned properties and saying they were all cash, but I knew they were like borrowing money. But I was like, I don't know, can I do that? You know, is that like gonna be cool? Like, are they gonna see proof of funds? I don't have proof of funds, so I guess I'll, you know, use this, you know, line of credit and I could show that. I had no idea. But I wanted to put my best foot forward, but I was like, I knew if I could show the capital, you know, in a line of credit, that at least like banks would take me seriously. You know what I mean? So I get the first deal. I think I win the bid by like $200. I buy the house for $160. I put in $70,000 to $75,000, and I sold it for $285,000. Like I said, not a ton of money. I think I netted $27,000, $28,000, but it was a win, and I was like, whoa. You know what I mean? I couldn't believe it. You know, for a while I was getting flack from my wife because I was pursuing this now for a while.
Yeah.
Like the process from when I was like, I'm gonna do this, to when I subsequently sold that first flip was an entire year.
Wow.
Between when I decided it and when I actually saw that money in my account was an entire year. And my wife, the whole time was like, you know, kind of calling it like a hobby. But it worked out, and that gave me the momentum, and then the fear was gone. The fear was gone, and I shouldn't say gone, but greatly diminished. And then shortly thereafter, I bid up on another house. At this point, I had a track record, and then I started pursuing other people for private money. And I would tell you that if there was the one gift that I have in this business is the ability to be a great steward of money. People sit there, they look at me, they know that their money is safe. Will never tell anybody it's not risk-free. There's always a risk, but they know at the end of the day they could look me in the eye and they could say, this guy, you know, is going to give everything he has. He's an honorable person, and it's always helped me. So I've always been able to raise additional capital, and it's nice because I've always had more money than I've had deals. And
that's awesome.
And so that's really been something that's worked out for me. And I kept pursuing house after house. Eventually finding that like the days of throwing a rock and hitting a house that you could buy, renovate, and resell on the open market, that was gone.
Yeah.
And I knew that. I knew that it was about a year later that I was like, I'm not getting anything. Like, I got to do something different. Yeah. Now I was like, you kind of know how to flip. You've raised the money, Jeremiah, but you're not finding anything. And that's when I really started pursuing, you know, the marketing aspect of it, and pursuing deals and getting discounted properties. And that same person, that same mentor that I had, recommended a vendor to do direct mail. He goes, listen, I don't do a lot of direct mail, but because like his market, he was finding properties left and right on the open market, bank-owned properties, anything on the MLS to flip, because I'm finding less and less. I'm gonna start doing some direct marketing. This guy reached out to me on my blog, why don't you give him a try? So I did. And I took one of my next flips, I made only $10,000. I took all that $10,000 and I put it into a direct marketing campaign. That direct marketing campaign yielded me 2 deals. Wow. 2 deals that I made $35,000 on each. $70,000. What did I do? I took that money and I started other marketing things. And even to this day, I'm constantly reinvesting in different marketing ventures, whether it's radio, different direct mail campaigns, different data sources, web lead generation. I'm constantly, my marketing budget since the day I started to now, almost month over month, gets higher and higher and higher. But it always produces. And you got to change and you have to adapt. But really, at the end of the day, after I did that first house and I had the confidence that, like, I can do this. I can do this. And I know that I can provide a great investment for people to earn like a fixed rate of return secured by real estate. I just got to go out and find the deals. I went all in on the marketing aspect. And then the deals started flowing in, and I still worked. I still worked, you know, at the job that I had, which was as much as I wanted to quit. I mean, I sat in cars from Queens to Long Island, hour-and-a-half commute home, miserable, wanting to quit, feeling like I don't need this job anymore. I don't need it anymore. I could just pursue the real estate thing full-time. But staying as long as I did allowed me to not feel the pressure of having to, you know, pay all the bills, because all the bills were being paid by my job. Right. And I was able to take that money and constantly reinvest it in the business, that by the time I left, and I ultimately left 2 years later from when I began to when I ultimately ended, you know, I had, you know, a running business, you know, certainly with a lot of leaks, but a business that I could, you know, walk into and start producing capital for me from day one. And walking away from, you know, a fairly sizable income with benefits and a pension and all that. It was a big decision to make, but it took a lot of time and patience, but ultimately it paid off.
It's like your job is kind of the investor, but instead of paying interest, you were giving them your time.
Yeah.
In exchange for the money, and then once you built it up enough, you kind of did your own thing.
Exactly.
You know? Exactly. And it was a sacrifice that had to be made, but it looks like, I mean, it ultimately paid off.
It did.
So, I mean, you mentioned you're doing 25 to 30 projects simultaneously at any given time, which I'm assuming that would be, I mean, triple digits in flips per year?
No, it's not triple digits, but it's 50 to 60. Okay. You know, because each project takes ultimately 5 to 6 months. So whatever we're doing at a time, double that, maybe a little bit more. And so yeah, we'll list about 60 houses this year.
Okay, so that's still a lot.
It's still
that's
a lot, yeah.
Now, do you outsource construction or do you own a construction company?
No, I outsource construction. And
Okay.
listen, just about everything I do, other than I have a very small team. Don't have a lot of overhead. I don't even have an actual office. My office is a room, good sized room, roughly this size. It's a sunroom off the side of my house that was there when we bought the house that we converted into an office. My wife is there with her real estate firm, her associate. I have one person working side by side, and obviously myself. Everybody else is virtual. And we keep the overhead low. And we basically take that money, as much money as I can make. I try to invest as much as I possibly can into other marketing techniques, and constantly always looking for different ways to get deals. You know what I mean? Because I didn't grow up on Long Island too. See, that's something also that I think people should understand. I grew up in Staten Island. I don't have any contacts here. I don't know anybody. There are a lot of people. Like, I think if you can be an investor in an area you grew up in, I think you have a big advantage. You know what I mean? Because you can lean on family, friends. People give you leads. Hey, so-and-so, I saw this. Hey, I saw that. I didn't have any of that. And honestly, even to this day, I mean, I've built up a network of people, but I don't have those family ties. I don't have that. So I've always kind of had to pay for the deals that I get, which is totally fine. But that's something that I'm constantly trying to pursue and get better at.
Wow, now you've actually built out like this large business. There's a few components here that I think a lot of people don't realize, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you need to know how to underwrite a deal.
Sure.
You need to understand construction.
Yes.
You need to have a good marketing machine if you're going to be able to do this consistently, make a business out of it. You need to be a money manager for private money and doing all of that. So,
and don't forget the internal operations.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so we outsource all our marketing, right? But I don't want people to understand that, like, I outsource as much as I possibly can to the people who can do it better than me, but you still have to have a team, right? So I have a small team, it's a virtual team, but a team nonetheless that is managing all these leads. And I had to put together a system that's ever evolving, ever changing, and I get a million ideas, so I'm constantly tweaking it. Sometimes it's a benefit, sometimes it's not, but you have to have an internal team to manage all these leads and to make sure that stuff's not falling through the cracks. I mean, it used to be that I would just go through the computer and be like, oh, we haven't called him. Couldn't even do that now. You know what I mean? We're generating 150 leads a month.
Wow.
So and you're paying so much for all this. So I've had to develop systems to make sure that things don't fall through the cracks, that we're constantly following up with people. But that's internal operations is a big part of it, which is why I don't have an internal construction company, because my focus is on getting the deals. If I get a deal at the right price, I can hire the right person, a general contractor, to handle it. He makes his money, he makes his profit, but at the end of the day, he handles all of that, and I don't have to think of that. And that's been a big part of it, making sure that I've had those people that I say, okay, you take this. I don't know a lot about direct mail. I do it, I spend a lot of money on it, but I give it to a company that can handle it. You know what I mean? I know nothing about pay-per-click. Nothing. I don't even know how to get into my Google Ads account. But I have a great pay-per-click company that can handle that for me. Same thing with any of those other marketing sources. I've always tried to outsource those things, but it is important that if you're building a business, like, you have to have the internal discipline to manage it. You have to be the glue that kind of ties everybody together. You may not be, hammering the nail. You may not be, sending out the physical letters, but you have to make sure it all ties together. And that's what I've been very good at.
That's awesome. Yeah, because there's so many moving pieces to this. I mean, there's a big difference between someone who does a flip here and there to make some supplemental versus someone who creates a machine.
Yeah.
And it's just a very different operation with a lot of moving parts, but if you do them all well, it's big. So a lot of people think the hardest part of investing in real estate is getting their hands on the money.
I know.
And what would you say is actually the hardest thing about flipping real estate?
I've heard some people say that the contractor element is the hardest. I disagree on that. It's hard. It's probably the second hardest. The hardest thing is always getting the deals. If you get the deal at the right price, you can afford to hire the right person. You hire the right person, then ultimately you're going to get a good product. And if even in a down market, right, a good well done, well crafted flip is gonna sell.
Yeah.
It's going to sell. So the rest of it kind of takes care of itself. So getting that good deal allows you to kind of step away and say, okay, sir, like you have this general contracting business, you need to make your money. That's great. This is what I have budgeted. And even if they come in a little high, you've got that spread, you've got that cushion that if they're the right people, they could just take that off your plate.
Yeah.
So the money part of it is not the hardest by any stretch. That said, you can't ever stop. You always have to be raising capital, because as you grow and you do more, I've gone into this where I spent too much time on the deal side or too much time finding contractors and not enough time on the money. And then I had to be like, oh shit, I gotta go out.
Yeah.
Like we're getting more deals, and it's very rare, but like I've always had more money than deals, but there's been times where there was a bit of a lag. And I went out and, I raised more money, and I basically filled that lag, and it happened very quickly, but I don't recommend that to people. So you gotta always go out there and be raising money, but it is very easy to raise money once you've done it, but you have to make sure that you're constantly doing it. No matter how much money you think you have, if you're putting together a strong enough machine, there's going to come a point in time where it's going to start to say that where deals are here or money's here and deals are here. It could go like that very quickly. So you always want to stay ahead of that.
Yeah, you always want to check the barometer on that.
Yeah.
So shifting gears for a second, tell me about because when you get into real estate investing, any investor I know, especially someone who does very high volume like you, has some crazy stories and some funny stories. Tell me a story that's like, what's one of the craziest purchases you ever did, or one of the wildest experiences you had?
There's a lot of wild stories. I was joking because a lot of them blend together. Actually, a house I sold not that long ago, major hoarder house. The woman reluctantly sold because she really had no choice, but it was a good size ranch that actually had like a whole attic space, first floor and basement, top to bottom with garbage. We finally got her to go forward with the deal. Her daughters were like, Mom, you have to sell this house. You have no choice. You have equity in it. So I made the deal that'll give her 30 days that she couldn't live in the house, but she could come to the house, and we would do like a room at a time. My contractor, like, he didn't know that this was happening. So I'm like, hey, surprise, pal. You can kind of gut one room at a time because we kind of have to work around her. So she would come and he'd be like trying to throw stuff in the garbage, and she'd be like going back into the garbage, pulling out like old Chef Boyardee cans that were like 15 years old.
Oh my God.
You know what I mean? And he would call me every day cursing, because we have that kind of relationship, cursing at me. I can't believe you fucking did this. This is unbelievable. Like, this woman's insane. Like, and it was so bad. Like, the house was literally like top to bottom. There were like the guys would be like pulling out garbage. Rats would be coming out, flying at them. But it was sad. But at the same time, the biggest issue I think that like we had was like she couldn't let go of anything. And this went on for a month. Each day of her coming to the house, fighting over what's garbage, those old towels, like they're covered in filth, they're not worth saving, you know what I mean? That was probably one of the crazier stories, one of the instances that I wish like we had a video camera present, because I'm not doing the story justice. But that was one of the crazier instances. We had another house that we bought, sold actually not that long ago as well, that had like 6 feet of water in the basement. It wasn't from like a flood.
You posted that one, right?
Yeah,
I saw that one. Yeah,
had 6 feet of water in the basement. That was crazy, but that really ended well. Like the people who sold us the house, it was our mother's house. Like they got to come back and see the house all redone, and they were really emotional because they saw like the way their mother was living, and that really like hurt them.
Sure.
Her mother died in the house, unfortunately. And now they come back and saw it all restored and back to its glory. And that's a big part of what we do, and I get a lot of joy out of it. We buy a lot of homes from people that this was their family home growing up, and unfortunately, it's pretty much down to its last leg, and we've been able to save it, restore it, bring it back to what it was without leveling it. You know what I mean? And that means a lot to people, especially if it's their family home. You know, they don't want to see that destroyed and, you know, turned to nothing where it's now some giant McMansion. It's kind of restored to its former glory, and it's cool to see that. Yeah,
definitely. That's incredible. And there's so much connected to a home. Decades of like experiences, so people, even after they sell it, move on, they still have a connection to it. So
yeah,
that's really cool. It's awesome when you don't have to kind of level it off, like you said, just to be able to restore it.
Yeah.
Question, just curious, where did that 6 feet of water come from?
That still today remains one of big mysteries. Water company, Suffolk County Water Authority says the water was off. They said the water kept coming in from the main line, from the street. Even though they said it was off, there was some leak somewhere where the water kept rising and rising and rising. The people who sold me the house told me that Suffolk County had said it was off, but it came from the main water line. So I don't know what happened, if there was a miscommunication, but there was some kind of leak somewhere, and the water just kept going until it literally was just coming out of like the basement stairwell, out the windows. It wasn't in like a flood zone or anything like that. You know, I'm never going to get Suffolk County Water Authority to admit that, you know, they didn't shut the water off, but if I had to guess, that's what happened.
That's intimidating.
Yeah.
If I saw that basement, I don't know if I would touch it, but you have a lot more experience than I do.
Yeah, and you know, I'm not afraid. I'm literally not afraid to get my hands dirty. I can tell you, that first house that I did, I was terrified. And it needed a fair amount of work, but in reality, it seems like a cakewalk. But after I did that first house, the more and more I kept just diving into bigger and bigger houses, you know what I mean? And so I'm at this point, in the very beginning, I was so afraid to fail. I'm not afraid anymore. You know what I mean? I'm not afraid to fail. And because I'm not afraid to fail, I take more chances. Because I take more chances, I do better. And because I have more money in the bank, I'm willing to take even more chances because I know, well, even if these go really, really bad, I could absorb the losses. But more often than not, it turns out to be better than I expected. Not always, but it allows itself to perpetuate.
That's awesome. So now going to the next subject, obviously, you know, your family is very important to you. And it's a big thing. And so talk about that a little bit, about the family, the size of it, you know, and then the motivators, what actually makes you keep going all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I feel as a father, I can't tell them what to do. I have to show them what to do. I have to show them. You have to show your kids what it is, right? You do that with this great business that you've had. You know, they come here and they see that, you know, that inspires me when I come here, right? You know what I mean? So I have to be able to inspire my kids. I didn't want to be one of those parents. It was like, do as I say, not as I do. It was like, no, we're going to do it, you know, we got to follow Dad's blueprint. So that's the main reason why I do this. I love what I do. Is it stressful? Yes. Does my blood pressure go up a lot? Yeah, sure, all the time. Are there headaches? Yeah, but at the end of the day, I'm happy. And if my kids can see that, then I don't care what they do, right? I don't care as long as whatever they're doing, they get fulfillment out of. Now, it's fortunate that the the business I'm in also provides very well. But by the same token, too, you know, if they wanted to be, you know, the best firefighter out there, or, you know what I mean, the best nurse, whatever it was, but they got joy and fulfillment out of that, and they say, well, my dad got joy and fulfillment out of his job and his career path, I want to be able to do the same. Then I feel I've accomplished my role as a parent. But for me, above all, what was important was to be around for them. And I said, going back to that story where, you know, my daughter kept having to go to the doctor, and we didn't even have the wherewithal to take her to the doctor. We'd have to have somebody else take her. That was a big, big problem. So the fact of the matter is that, like, on a dime, I can turn around. You know, I have a son, to get personal, I have a son that has some behavioral issues, but I'm able now to spend the time and the resources to address those problems and concerns, and I'm there for them. So that, to me, is really the biggest success, is the fact that, like, my kids can see that they see their father all the time, but then also see that their father's doing what he loves.
That's incredible. You know, I'm recently a new father, only 5 months in, but you know, when you do have kids, it really does change you.
Yeah.
You really become a different person.
Yeah.
And you know, what you're saying means, even though I've been a father for a short amount of time so far, it resonates a lot heavier. Had you told me the same story a year ago, I could understand, but then when you become a parent, you really understand.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a big deal. You know, so you're basically you're living your dream at this point. Like you've designed a life, and you found that you have that family what you want. You have the the business that you want. And we were talking a little bit offline, and you said when you first got into this business and flipping houses, if you were making like $200K a year, you'd be happy.
Yes.
And I mean, now it's safe to say, you have a multi-7-figure business. That scale, when someone's thinking about growing, sometimes it can't conceptualize. So I feel like if you haven't done it yet, you can't feel it yet.
Yeah.
And then as you start to do it, it becomes more and more real. And look, real estate investing is one of the sexiest things that out there. Like everyone you talk to either wants to do it, is doing it, trying to do it. So everyone has that vision. And for someone watching right now that really wants to get started in it, if you had to give them like a quick guideline of like, this is how you get started, what would be your best advice to them?
The best advice I can give is do one. Everyone's thinking about 100. I want to do 10 deals a month. I want to do 20 deals a month. I want to do whatever it is. Do one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then after you do one, okay, do two. You know what I mean? Like this was not an overnight thing. Yes, the business has grown quite a bit. Now, I will say this, you always have to have a growth mindset. But again, don't expect to go from 0 to 100 overnight. Just try to get 1% better every day. I have what I've wanted, but I wake up every day like somebody's trying to take it away from me. I wake up every day knowing that I got to continue to work to keep it where it is, and I'm always trying to get better, always trying to push it. And I've always joked that the harder I work, the luckier I get, right? So at the end of it all, I would tell people, for me personally, the biggest impact of my career was that first house. So all these people, and I did this for a long time, and I talk about this all the time, they're professional event goers. And it's like, you gotta stop going to events, you gotta stop reading books. Don't say you should go to those, but you gotta actually do a deal.
Yeah.
Do one house. If you do one house, it'll change who you are. It's kind of like having kids.
Yeah.
It changes. I've never been the same since that first deal happened. Okay, then I did one. Okay, now let's try. Maybe then do 2 houses. Then you do 2, 2 becomes 4, becomes 8, 16. You know what I mean? I mean, if you take a penny and you double it every single day, 1 cent, 2 cents, 4 cents, 8, by the end of the 30 days, it becomes like $10 million or something like that, right? So if you think about it from that standpoint, like start off small, I'm gonna do 1, then I'm gonna do 2, then I'm gonna do 4, then and then it grows quicker, but don't try to skip the steps. Just try to get a little bit better every day. But the biggest jump, the singular biggest jump that you can make is from nothing to 1. 0 to 1 is the hardest. After that, it starts to get easier.
Wow, that's great advice. In racing, they say smooth is fast.
Yeah.
That's kind of like what you just said. It's like smooth is fast. Get that 1, do it clean, and then just go to 2, and then it'll just start compounding and rolling from there.
Yeah.
So the last piece I want to talk about, which is really, it's talked about in books, but investors don't talk about it too much. Obviously, there's a lot of capital gains tax in flipping real estate. How do you manage that and absorb that to kind of like create a business where you're able to expand on it versus pay all of it to Uncle Sam?
Well, it's a fair point. Going back to constantly increasing our marketing, I'm always reinvesting in the business. You know what I mean? That's a big part of it, which has also fueled bigger profits. But in turn, I'm always looking for, how to spend more. And it's not because I want to spend for the sake of spending. I want to spend because I'm growing. So we've been fortunate that we've put a lot back into the business. But I would recommend for a lot of people who are watching, there's a good book called Profit First. And it kind of goes into a lot of that stuff about how you should segregate your accounts, X amount set up for taxes, but actually taking your profit first before paying anything. It's an unusual concept, but it's something that's now being implemented by a lot of accountants, CFO types, fractional CFOs have developed entire business models by implementing this profit first scheme, or method, I should say. Scheme is the wrong word. But yeah, I mean, the capital gains tax is a killer. But like anything, I do look at it as a privilege to pay taxes.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I've always found myself looking to take that money, reinvest it, obviously allows me to offset my tax liability, but in turn has fueled, tremendous growth in the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, if I'm doing the math right, it looks like you got into this game 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So in 6 years, you've just catapulted to the next level. How do people follow you? What's the best way for them to follow you?
I do a lot we're active on Suffolk County House Buyers, my company. We're active on Facebook. We're active on Instagram. Facebook, personally, Jeremiah Dalton. There's not many Jeremiah Daltons, so they can friend me on Facebook. And people can message me, you know what I mean? Like, I feel as though I've been very, very fortunate to be in the position that I always wanted to be in. I can tell you there was a lot of times I reached out to a lot of investors over the years. Most of them didn't even respond. You know what I mean? And that was kind of a little bit of a kick in the gut. But like that gentleman that became my first mentor, he responded. You know what I mean? And I'm not a coach. I'm not here to coach people, but I am very passionate about giving back and helping people. You know what I mean? Because I do see a lot of people trying to be coaches, and in reality, like we were talking about this offline, like getting the deal is the hardest part. If you can't teach somebody how to get deals, then you're taking their money and you're wasting their time.
Yeah, no deal, no money.
Exactly.
That's it. That's awesome. Jeremiah, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it. So there you have it. Money Mondays, every Monday we get together and you hear from a high-producing entrepreneur how they built out their business. Look, when you're getting started in it, it can feel like an uphill battle, but you're not in alone, and we're with you every step of the way. Tune in next Monday for the next Money Monday. Until then, be great.